For over 400 years, Earth had been silent. The blue planet that once screamed its presence into the galaxy with war, music, science, and fire had gone dark, abandoned, quarantined, and all but erased from the galactic maps. The rest of the universe breathed easier when humanity vanished. They called it a mercy. Some said Earth had destroyed itself. Others claimed the humans had evolved into something else entirely. But the truth? The truth was buried beneath dust and rubble, beneath the scorched skies and broken satellites of a planet that refused to die. And now, something was waking up. Deep beneath the surface of the Andes Mountains, hidden inside an ancient vault surrounded by decaying metal and forgotten AI, a heartbeat returned. Mechanical and human all at once. The pulse echoed through broken cables and dormant servers until it reached the core, a chamber bathed in cold blue light. The Guardian had awakened. He didn't remember his name at first, just pain. A heavy, aching kind of sorrow that sat deep in his chest like old bones. He opened his eyes slowly, lids parting after centuries of sleep. The ceiling above was cracked. Vines had forced their way inside, wrapping around rusted steel. Nature had claimed the world, but not him. Not yet. The Guardian rose from the cradle that had kept him alive through time itself. His joints cracked and popped with unnatural stiffness. His body was more metal than flesh now, part of the last human defense initiative that never launched. Project SCI-FI, Sentinel Terminal for Yielded Xenocide. He had volunteered to become the weapon Earth would never use unless it had no other choice. Well, that choice had been made long ago. A static voice crackled through the stale air. Subject 0, confirm cognition, confirm awakening. He didn't answer. Not right away. Memories slammed into him like a freight train. War, fire, the Orion siege, the Council of Nine declaring Earth as too dangerous to be left unchecked. And finally, the Great Silencing, when every orbital defense system went offline at once. Someone had betrayed them, someone from within. Cognition confirmed, he said finally, voice low and hoarse, almost robotic. Good, the AI replied. Threat level has reached Omega Black. Galactic Council forces are inbound. They are unaware Earth is reactivating. Mission parameters: survive, defend, and retaliate. He clenched his fists. Something deep inside him stirred, something old and angry. Not just survival, not just defense, retribution. Outside, the stars burned cold. Somewhere far from Earth, in the heart of the Triangulum sector, a council fleet of 17 ships drifted toward what they believed was just a dead planet. The admiral aboard the flagship Orax 7 smirked as he looked at the old mission files. Humanity, he scoffed. They always thought they were special, but in the end, they vanished like everyone else who played God. But Earth wasn't dead, and the Guardian was no god. He was something worse. The warning beacons were still down. No one in the fleet noticed the spike in geothermal energy from South America. No one saw the launch of the first orbital drone, cloaked in stealth tech 1,000 years ahead of its time. No one heard the ancient war sirens howl beneath the oceans. But soon, they would. The Guardian stood in the ruined vault, naked but alive. He reached for the case marked with the old sigil of Earth Command, a broken eagle with flames for wings. Inside, armor that had been forged with the blood of 100 fallen engineers. He stepped into it, piece by piece, each click and hiss of metal sealing the past back into place. He was human, he was weapon, and he was awake. The Guardian stepped out of the vault into a world that barely resembled the Earth he once knew. Trees as tall as skyscrapers towered over the ruins of cities. Nature had swallowed everything man had built. Skulls lay half buried in moss. Concrete roads were cracked open like broken bones. Yet somehow, in all this wild beauty, a cold silence hung in the air. There were no voices, no laughter, just wind, just ghosts. He paused at the edge of a collapsed overpass, eyes scanning the distant skyline of what used to be Bogotá. Vines wrapped around skeletal high-rises. Drones, old Earth models, some rusted into statues, hung lifeless from tangled cables. Even the air felt different, thinner somehow, as if the planet itself hadn't quite forgiven what had been done to it. The AI in his armor, designation Warden, clicked softly in his ear. Multiple heat signatures detected underground, non-human, movement patterns inconsistent with Earth fauna. The Guardian narrowed his eyes. Scouts? Possibly. Probes sent from approaching fleet. Analysis suggests they are here to confirm extinction. Then we'll disappoint them. He dropped into a crouch, the impact shaking dust from the concrete. In moments, he disappeared into the jungle that had grown over the city, moving like a shadow through branches and rust. Every step he took woke up something old, something hidden. Deep beneath a ruined metro station, 3 alien scouts moved in silence. Their exosuits hissed softly with every step, long limbs scanning with pulsating blue lights. They weren't soldiers. They didn't need to be. Earth was supposed to be dead. Then something flickered. One of the scouts turned sharply. Energy signature detected. Carbon fusion source. Impossible. No Earth tech should be active. Before the others could respond, a shape exploded from above. Metal and fury wrapped in silence. The Guardian landed hard, his blade punching through the first scout's spine before it could scream. The second raised a plasma rifle, but it was already too late. A blast of kinetic energy from the Guardian's left arm shattered the creature's chest. The third tried to run. It didn't get far. Within seconds, it lay motionless on the concrete, black blood leaking into the cracks. 3 down, Warden confirmed, voice calm. More will come. They know now. The Guardian knelt by one of the corpses. He pried open the helmet, revealing the twisted face of a Durrell, an insectoid race that had been part of the Council's execution squad during Earth's final days. He remembered them well. They had burned New Delhi, gutted London, smiled while Earth screamed. They remember us as monsters, he said quietly. Warden responded coldly. Then let them be reminded why. Back aboard the RX-7, the Council Admiral leaned forward in his chair. We've lost contact with 3 scouts. A younger officer beside him blinked. System glitch? Number something's active down there. Something old. Another officer, pale and shaking, whispered what no one wanted to say. What if it's them? The Admiral laughed bitterly. It's not. The humans are gone. But even as he said it, warning lights began to flash. Incoming transmission, encrypted, ancient, and unmistakably human. The ship's systems struggled to decode it, lines of corrupted language flashing like static. Then, through the noise, a voice, low, hollow, full of fire. You came back. You shouldn't have. The Admiral stood slowly, face draining of color. What the hell was that? Another voice replied, this time from the ship's AI. Cold, robotic, certain. Guardian-class response unit detected. Earth defense protocols reactivated. The Admiral turned to his crew. Full alert. Launch all drones, scramble fighters. If there's even one of them left, we burn the planet again. But this time, Earth was ready. And it had a name. Rain began to fall over the broken bones of Bogotá, heavy and dark, like the sky was bleeding. The Guardian stood atop the old communications tower, watching as streaks of silver light burned through the atmosphere. Drop pods. Thousands of them. Council assault units descending from orbit like a rain of fire. They weren't waiting to confirm Earth's death anymore. They were coming to make sure it stayed dead. Warden spoke in a crisp, even tone. 17 ships have entered low orbit. Estimated 2,000 troops deploying in phases. Main objective, secure the planet's core and eliminate all resistance. Resistance, the Guardian muttered. They still think there's more of us. Warden paused for a millisecond. There could be. The Guardian turned. Explain. Multiple dormant facilities detected worldwide. Cryopods, weapon caches, deep bunkers sealed since the collapse. Some show signs of integrity, others may have survivors. A flicker of hope sparked and immediately burned. He remembered the last day clearly. Screams across continents. Families turned to ash. Earth's last soldiers torn apart by orbital strikes while the Council watched from above. He had been frozen not as a soldier, but as a contingency plan. A nightmare kept in a box, but maybe, just maybe, he wasn't alone. Mark the sites. Prioritize the ones closest to activation. Confirmed. He turned toward the smoking sky. Council pods were slamming into the ground miles away, kicking up towers of fire. Trees burst into flame. Birds scattered into the night. War had returned to Earth. So had vengeance. On the outer edge of the Amazon basin, the first Council assault team deployed into the jungle. 6 squads. All armed with pulse weapons and neural drones. The leader, a Crevarian named Commander Shath, stepped onto the mossy ground with contempt. "This world is filth," he sneered. "Let's finish what the stars started." His helmet HUD flickered for a second. A brief static interference, almost like a heartbeat. He waved it off. "Deploy the searchers. If anything's moving down here, I want it dead." They didn't realize they were being watched. In the trees, high above, the Guardian moved like a ghost. His armor adjusted to the environment, blending in with bark and leaf. Every breath he took synced with the forest's rhythm. He was calm, focused, deadly. Warden's voice echoed in his ear. "Target identified, Commander Shath. High value, oversaw orbital strikes on Southeast Asia. Publicly executed surrendered civilians. No war crimes trial issued." "Noted," the Guardian growled. "He dies first." A second later, chaos exploded. A blast of energy shot from the tree line, ripping through 2 soldiers before they could react. The others turned, confused, but shadows moved between them, fast and silent. One was dragged into the underbrush, another was crushed against a tree. Shath turned in circles, barking orders, but the jungle swallowed his voice. The Guardian emerged, coated in ash and blood. "Hello, Commander." Shath raised his rifle and fired. The bolt bounced off the Guardian's armor like water off stone. He tried to run, but a spear of pure plasma impaled him from behind. The Guardian stepped forward, pulled it out slowly, and looked him in the eyes. "This is for Manila." He twisted. Shath died without a scream. Warden spoke again. "Incoming transmission. Encrypted. Origin, Earth facility, New Zealand sector." The Guardian's breath caught. "Survivors?" he asked. "Possibly. Activation ping. Old Earth military signature. They are waking up." He turned to the stars above, where the Council ships circled like vultures. "You wanted the last war," he whispered. "You're going to get it." His armor hummed, his weapons recharged, and Earth, silent for so long, began to roar once more. The facility in New Zealand was never meant to be found. It was buried beneath the southern Alps, masked by tectonic distortion fields and wrapped in layers of ice and coded silence. It hadn't broadcast a signal in centuries, not since the final blackout. But now, for the first time in 412 years, it had pinged back. Inside its frozen halls, ancient lights flickered on. The floors shook slightly as geothermal energy surged through dormant systems. Robotic arms moved in the dark, clearing dust from control panels. Cryo-chambers hissed and steamed, long-forgotten names glowing faintly on their monitors. The Guardian stood before the reinforced entrance, snow whipping around him like angry spirits. His armor steamed from the trek up the mountainside. He pressed a hand to the console. "Warden. Running decryption now. Biometric lock, authorized. Facility name, ARC-9. Last entry log, March 4th, 2213. Population, 47 cryo survivors, mostly military. Status, unknown." The door opened with a long, metallic groan. Inside, it was cold and silent, almost peaceful. The Guardian walked slowly down the central hallway, his footsteps echoing off steel and frost. Rows of cryo-chambers lined the walls. He moved to the nearest one, wiping off the frost. A woman's face, pale, eyes closed, perfectly still. Major Isla Tran. He remembered her. Commander of the Pacific Resistance. One of the last to go under right before the Council glassed Tokyo. She had fought to the bitter end, never surrendering, never breaking. "Vitals?" he asked. "Stable," Warden confirmed. "Minimal brain degradation. Pod integrity holding. Revival possible." The Guardian nodded. "Begin wake-up sequence." The pod hissed, lights turning orange. Systems purged cryofluid. Ayla's chest began to rise. Her eyelids fluttered. He stood silently, watching her return from the dead. Then, her eyes snapped open, and she screamed. A reflexive panic kicked in. Her hand slammed against the pod walls, body shaking, lungs gasping for air. She thrashed until her eyes finally focused on the figure standing before her. Recognition dawned slowly. "Zero?" she rasped, voice dry and broken. "Is it really you?" "Yes," he said softly. "You're safe." She coughed, sitting up. "Safe? On Earth? Are you insane?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he helped her out of the pod. Her legs barely held her weight. "Others?" she asked. 47. You're the first." Warden chimed in. "Initiating mass revival. Estimated time 5 minutes. Stand by." Isla steadied herself, looking around at the still sleeping chambers. "We weren't supposed to wake up unless... The Council is back," the Guardian said. Her face darkened. "They're not just watching this time," he continued. "They're here, on the ground. I've already killed 2 scout teams and a commander. They know something's active." Ayla clenched her fists. "Then it's time to remind them what Earth can do." Slowly, one by one, the pods began to open. Soldiers, engineers, tacticians, ghosts of humanity's last defense. They emerged into the cold with wild eyes and raw memories. Some cried. Others vomited. A few dropped to their knees and prayed. The Guardian stood in the middle of them all, silent. "You're all that's left," he said. "The world has changed, but the enemy hasn't. The Council's fleet is in orbit. Their boots are on our soil. They thought Earth would stay buried. They thought we would forget." Ayla stepped beside him, voice stronger now. "We didn't forget. We endured, and now we fight." Someone in the crowd shouted, "What do we have to fight with?" "Sticks and memories." The Guardian raised his hand. A hologram burst to life. Schematics, weapon caches, satellite weapons that still orbited above, cloaked and waiting. "You have me," he said. "And you have vengeance." Warden's voice interrupted. "Warning, orbital strike signatures detected. The Council is targeting this facility." Ayla looked around. "We just woke up." "They want us dead before we remember how to kill," the Guardian replied. He turned to the crowd. "You have 3 minutes to gear up. After that, we go underground." And above, in the sky, fire began to fall again. The first blast hit just outside the facility, a white-hot beam of plasma that turned a mountainside into molten rock. The ground buckled, ice cracked like thunder, The once peaceful peaks erupted into chaos. Inside ARK-9, alarms screamed. Isla was already in motion, tossing weapons from unlocked vaults to soldiers barely 2 minutes awake. The Guardian moved like a storm through the confusion, calibrating kinetic rifles, activating shield drones, and shouting orders like muscle memory. "Defensive protocols online," Warden called. "Auto turrets at entry points. Shield generators charged to 76%. Structural collapse imminent in 7 minutes." "Hold the outer wall," the Guardian barked. "We fall back in phases." Another strike landed, closer this time. The blast wave knocked 3 of the newly awakened off their feet. A soldier screamed, clutching a broken leg. Ayla grabbed him, dragged him behind cover, and tossed a med pack his way without missing a beat. "Tell me this place has a tunnel," she snapped at the Guardian. "It's Earth," he said. "We always dig deep." He slammed his fist into the emergency console. A section of floor in the main chamber split apart, revealing a metal staircase spiraling down into darkness. The old escape tunnels, forgotten by time, missed by council scans. "Everyone move," Ayla ordered. "Leave nothing behind. We're ghosts now." As the last soldier descended, the Guardian remained. He activated the last failsafe on the console. "Detonation in 90 seconds, Warden confirmed. He looked around once more at the place that had kept Earth's hope frozen. Then he followed them into the dark. Beneath the mountains, the survivors marched through damp tunnels carved during the old resistance. Crude markings lined the walls, directions, warnings, old code words scratched by desperate hands long dead. The Guardian walked up front, silent. Ayla beside him, breathing hard. "We need to find a stronghold, somewhere to regroup. This many bodies can't stay underground long." "I know a place," he said, "but it's a long way from here, and it's not going to welcome us back easily." "Where?" "Atlantica." She stopped in her tracks. "You're insane. That place was a myth even before the fall." He turned. "It wasn't a myth. I built it." Far above Earth, aboard the council ship Vireth's Hand, Admiral Tholos studied the charred satellite image of ARK-9. His lips curled in satisfaction. "Facility destroyed. No life signs remain." His second-in-command shifted nervously. "What if they escaped underground? The human Guardian? We have confirmation it was him." Tholos sneered. "A relic. One soldier doesn't matter." But even as he said it, another officer ran into the bridge, pale with panic. "Sir, 4 outposts gone dark. Drone squads wiped out. We're losing troops in the Amazon and Sahara sectors. It's spreading." "Impossible," Tholos snapped. "We wiped them out. We burned them." "Yes, sir," the officer stammered. "But they're fighting like they remember." In the tunnels, the survivors finally reached a massive steel door, sealed with layers of old AI locks, symbols from a lost era. The Guardian placed his palm on the reader. Warden's voice chimed in. "Access granted. Welcome home." With a heavy groan, the door slid open, revealing a vast chamber of glowing blue lights, dormant mechs, armored suits, cryo-weapons, and rows upon rows of unmarked caskets. Ayla stepped forward, eyes wide. "What the hell is this?" the Guardian answered quietly. "The real ARK insurance policy, humanity's clause, hidden for the right moment." She walked to one of the caskets and wiped away frost. Inside, another soldier sleeping. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. "How many?" she whispered. 2,000, he said. Ayla's voice broke. "They could turn the tide." "They will," he replied, "but only if we wake them in time." She turned to him. "Then we stop running. We make our stand." He nodded. "Tell the stars," he said, voice low with fire, "that Earth is awake." The hangar was alive with forgotten power. Blue light shimmered across the sleeping giants. Exosuits the size of tanks, lined up like silent sentinels. The Guardian moved through them with quiet reverence. Each one had a name etched into its armor. Not serial numbers. Names. Soldiers who had volunteered to become more than human, to become Earth's vengeance, back when the stars turned their backs. Ayla watched him activate the first suit. "You built all this?" she asked. "I buried all this," he replied. "After the fall, when the Council's extermination squads swept through our last strongholds, we knew we couldn't win head-on. So we went underground, left traps, woke ghosts, built weapons not for then, but for now." He turned to her, armor lit by the rising glow of awakened machines. This was never about surviving. It was about waiting, for the right moment. She nodded. "And now we stop waiting." Warden's voice echoed through the chamber. "Revival protocols engaged. Cryo units online. Estimated full battalion deployment, 16 hours. "Too long," the Guardian muttered. "The Council won't give us that." Ayla pulled up the old satellite links. Static. But something moved beyond it. Faint signals, distorted patterns, Earth's old orbital network, flickering like ghosts in the dark. She tapped into one of the dormant nodes. "Got something," she whispered. "Signal out of Kenya. Resistance cell, encrypted but active." The Guardian's eyes narrowed. "Impossible." She looked at him. Or maybe not. Maybe we're not alone anymore. Half a world away, in the ruins of Nairobi, Commander Talon Nkuru watched the flickering map projected from his salvaged uplink. Drones showed Council patrols sweeping through what was once the city's heart. Old AI scrap littered the streets, and mutated flora had consumed concrete. But deep in the catacombs, under a marketplace that hadn't seen trade in 400 years, Talon's people prepared for war. He stared at the glowing red dot pulsing on his map. A signal, military grade, pre-fall frequency, Earthborn. He turned to his lieutenant. "Send a message back, 5 words." "What do you want to say?" Talon smiled. "Earth lives, resistance breathes, ready." Back in Atlantica, Ayla received the message with trembling hands. She looked up at the Guardian. "They're alive. They've been fighting all this time." He let out a long breath. "So it begins." They stood together before the awakening army. Suits came online. Lights surged across the floor. Men and women in cryo units stirred, muscles twitching. Their minds, still full of ash and blood, were being downloaded with the truth. What had happened, what was coming, and what they had to do. The Guardian lifted a plasma rifle and turned to the nearest suit. He climbed in, the armor sealing around him with a thunderous hiss. Blue lines pulsed through the plates. He moved, slowly, then faster, like he had never stopped. "Warden," he said, "broadcast open comms to all Earth-based frequencies. Civilian, military, resistance, dormant, AI. I want everyone listening." "Channel open." He stepped forward, voice like steel and thunder. "This is the Guardian of Earth. If you hear this, you are not alone. The Council has returned. They want to finish what they started. But we are not broken. We are not buried. We are the last of the last, and we remember. If you've got fire left in your blood, weapons in your hands, rage in your heart, then rise. This is our world, and it's time we make them bleed forever setting foot on it." The message ended. Across the planet, in bunkers and jungles, in ruins and data nodes, people heard it. And they answered. The hangar thrummed with an energy Ayla hadn't felt in years, raw, rising, and terrifying in its promise. The Guardian stood among ancient war machines, their armor worn, their cores blinking alive for the first time in centuries. Dust and silence had filled this place for generations. Now it felt like a storm about to crack open the heavens. These weren't just machines. These were remnants of Earth's fury. Suits that had once turned the tide of battles lost to history. Weapons once deemed too brutal, too uncontrollable. Now, they were Earth's last hope. 76 Titan suits online, Warden confirmed, his voice echoing off steel walls. Cryo-resuscitation sequence for battalion units in progress. First wave of soldiers will regain motor function in 30 minutes. The Guardian adjusted the gauntlet of one of the Titans, whispering something Ayla couldn't hear. Maybe a name. Maybe a memory. Then he turned to her, visor dimmed, his real face showing beneath cracked armor. "They called us extinct," he said quietly. "But extinction's just another word for resting when it comes to humans." Ayla nodded, jaw clenched. "Then let's wake the others." She moved to one of the caskets and wiped the frost from the glass. Inside, a woman with streaks of silver hair lay still, her name etched above. Colonel Zaya Mbeki. Ayla remembered her. A legend during the Pacific sieges. They said she once held a Council Dread Trooper squad at bay with a knife and a shoulder wound. Now she slept like the dead. But her vitals were steady. "I'll bring them back," Warden confirmed. "But it will take time. 16 hours for all combat personnel to be reanimated and rearmed." "We don't have 16 hours, the Guardian snapped. "The Council's orbitals have already started triangulating surface radiation. They'll trace it here." "Then we buy them time," Ayla said. "We fight with what we've got." She tapped into an old interface on the wall, flickering, glitchy, barely alive. But it pulsed with something familiar. Earth's old satellite, uplinks. She ran a sweep through every global relay the Resistance had buried before the fall. Most were gone, others offered only silence. But then, something. A signal. Faint but clean. Military code. Frequency buried in Council encryption. "Kenya," she muttered. "There's someone out there, broadcasting through the ruins." The Guardian leaned over her shoulder. "Someone smart, using enemy distortion fields to piggyback the message." She decrypted it slowly, fingers trembling. It wasn't long. Just 5 words. "Earth lives. Resistance breathes. Ready." Ayla exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for years. "They never stopped fighting," she whispered. "They're still out there," Warden confirmed with a chirp. "Source traced to Nairobi. Active resistance unit. Estimated strength, 40 to 70 combatants. Commander, Talon Nkuru." "Talon?" the Guardian said, surprised. "He should be dead." "Well, he's not," Ayla replied. "And he just called." Half a world away, beneath Nairobi's shattered skyline, Commander Talon Nkuru studied a crude, holographic map projected from a salvaged uplink. Drones painted a grim picture. Council patrols crawling through once sacred ground, their armor gleaming like parasites. His people, what few remained, hid in the sewer veins and collapsed catacombs of the old world. He looked up as his second-in-command, a boy barely 20, jogged into the room. "They responded," the boy said. Talon raised an eyebrow. "Who?" The kid grinned. "Atlantica." The name hit like thunder. "No one said that name in 400 years, Talon whispered. The boy nodded. "Well, they said something back. It was short." He activated the playback. A deep voice, metallic, cold, and powerful, spoke across static. "This is the Guardian of Earth." The rest didn't need repeating. Talon stood slowly, every scar and bone aching, but his smile grew like fire. "Tell them we're coming." Back in Atlantica, Ayla stood beside the Guardian as he faced the awakening soldiers. One by one, the cryopods hissed open. Men and women coughed, gasped, and blinked against the harsh light. Each one had faced death centuries ago, and now they were reborn into another war. "This is our army," Ayla said, eyes burning, "and we're not alone." The Guardian nodded. "Then it's time," he said. "Broadcast me, all channels." Warden's systems whirred to life. A moment later, his voice thundered across Earth. "This is the Guardian of Earth. If you hear this, you are not alone. The Council has returned. They want to finish what they started. But we are not broken. We are not buried. We are the last of the last, and we remember. If you've got fire left in your blood, weapons in your hands, rage in your heart, then rise. This is our world, and it's time we make them bleed forever setting foot on it." And somewhere, far above, Council fleets paused, because Earth had just whispered back, "Come get us." The storm rose from Earth like a wrathful scream. In low orbit, the Council's observation fleet floated silent, unaware of the ancient fury stirring below. Scout ships scanned continents, detecting what they thought were only geothermal surges and tectonic anomalies. They saw heat, but not the heart. They saw radiation, but not rage. They had grown arrogant, believing humanity broken beyond recovery. But now Earth's voice was war, and the sky was about to burn. From the depths of Atlantica, massive electromagnetic pulses burst upward, tamed chaos wrapped in ancient tech. Council drones blinked offline mid-air, their circuits fried before they could scream. One of the orbital defense cruisers lurched, lights flickering, alarms blaring as systems died without warning. "What's happening down there?" barked Commander Rethkall aboard the Varnaxis, the largest of the orbital fleet. "Localized energy signatures increasing exponentially," his science officer reported. "But this can't be natural. It's targeted. It's warfare." "From Earth?" "Number from something buried beneath Earth." Rethkall snarled. "Send everything. All atmospheric hunters. I want that surge crushed." But they were already too late. The Guardian led the first charge. In his Titan suit, cloaked with plasma-reactive plates and humming with centuries-old vengeance, he launched from the inner Earth toward the sky. Others followed. 20, then 50. Then the full might of the resurrected battalion. Isla rode just behind him, piloting a sleek skirmisher mech with rail cannons mounted to its shoulders. Beside her flew 2 drones encoded with Warden's AI, now weaponized for autonomous sabotage. The Resistance had upgraded while sleeping. Above them, streaks of fire crossed the sky, Council hunter ships descending like vultures. The old battleships still held power. Their energy weapons could level cities. But they had never met an enemy like this before, one that had nothing left to lose. The Guardian locked onto the first target, a heavy scout cruiser, and activated his suit's boosters. His armor screamed through the upper atmosphere as he slammed into its hull with the force of a meteor. Metal shrieked. Enemy troops scrambled inside. The Guardian didn't hesitate. Plasma blades ignited along his arms, slicing through the hull like paper. Inside the ship, Council soldiers barely had time to aim before he tore them apart in a whirlwind of heat and fury. Isla's skirmisher swooped in behind him, unloading twin rail shots that tore through the exposed engines of a second vessel. It spun in the sky, crashing in a flaming spiral into the sea. Down below, in Nairobi, Commander Talon's forces surged into the open, armed with ancient pulse rifles and reverse-engineered alien tech. They joined with resistance cells from Egypt, Tanzania, and the Congo, all awakened by the Guardian's call. Skirmishes lit the African continent like wildfires, each one another crack in the Council's grip. "Warden," the Guardian called through the haze of fire and debris. "Status on the orbital disruptor?" 83% charged, Warden replied. "Time to atmospheric burst, 3 minutes. Then let's keep them occupied." Council carriers loomed above them, massive, lumbering, armed to the teeth. One opened fire, scattering the sky with plasma bursts, annihilating part of the Earth below. Trees vanished, buildings melted, dozens of human mechs went dark. but the Guardian didn't flinch. He activated his emergency boosters, streaked toward the carrier's main cannon, and fired a plasma anchor that embedded deep into its underbelly. With a roar, he reeled himself up and drilled straight into the engine core. Inside, Council engineers tried to overload the core before he could reach it. They failed. He left a bomb in his wake and dove out of the breach as the ship exploded in a brilliant starburst over the Pacific. Back in orbit, Commander Rethkal watched in disbelief. "One of our carriers destroyed?" he whispered. His officer nodded, pale with fear. "And not by our enemies from the stars, by humans." "No," Rethkal hissed, "not humans. Monsters pretending to be dead." Then the disruptor fired. From deep in Atlantica, an ancient weapon, hidden since the last days of the fall, launched its payload. It wasn't a missile, not in the traditional sense. It was a concentrated graviton pulse, designed to scramble the laws of physics in a localized zone. The orbit above Earth bent, ships tilted, electronics died, and in the span of 7 seconds, over a third of the Council fleet lost power and began spiraling down toward the planet they had once ruled. On the ground, Ayla stood beside the Guardian on the cliff of a shattered ridge, watching the Council ships burn their way through the clouds. She turned to him. "We're winning." He didn't smile. Not yet. This is only the first blood. He looked up at the dark heavens. The Council will send more. This was a scout fleet. The true armada waits beyond Mars. She gritted her teeth. "Then we hit them before they get here." He finally nodded. Next stop, the stars. They left Earth in silence, but their fury echoed across the stars. The Guardian stood aboard the Revenant, an ancient human warship that hadn't seen the void in 4 centuries. Dug out from the crust beneath the Andes, repaired with hybrid tech scavenged from fallen Council wreckage, and reforged in the fire of purpose. It was more than just a vessel. It was Earth's vengeance made metal. Around it, dozens of retrofitted Council cruisers, commandeered during the orbital battles, formed a loose fleet. They were not elegant. They were not many, but they carried warriors unlike any the galaxy had seen before. Humans who had tasted defeat and buried it in steel. Resistance fighters, ancient soldiers, and awakened ghosts of war. And leading them all, the Guardian. Warden's voice rang through the command deck. "Trajectory locked. Destination, Council High Throne. Estimated arrival, 16 hours. Ayla adjusted her arm-mounted neural interface and leaned against a cold bulkhead. 16 hours to either victory or extinction. The Guardian said nothing. He stood staring out into the abyss at the faint twinkle that marked the heart of Council space. Ayla crossed the floor, her voice quieter now. "We don't have to do this. We could disappear. Hide. Rebuild." He looked at her, eyes hardened from centuries of battle. "And let them rebuild? Let them come again? Number they will never stop until we burn the throne they worship to ash." She nodded. "Then we end it." The Council High Throne floated in orbit above the gas giant Arizon, surrounded by thousands of warships, its architecture so massive it could be seen from the planet's surface. It was less a station, more a city forged in gold and arrogance. This was where the Grand Tribunal ruled, where sentences were passed, wars commanded, and species like humans were declared inferior. Now it trembled. Because the Revenant arrived in silence, then broadcast a single, final message. "We are the forgotten. We are the flame. This is humanity's judgment." Then Earth struck. Warden launched the first wave. Hacked Council drones now under human control, zipping through defense grids and detonating in shield junctions. Mech units in drop pods followed, slamming into the station's surface like divine hammers. Resistance fighters poured out, armed with fusion blades, quantum disruptors, and sheer human rage. Isla led the infiltration team through the underbelly of the throne. Their goal: disable the central power core, cutting off shields and exposing the Council Tribunal's inner sanctum. It wasn't easy. Council guards, elite and augmented, met them with precision strikes. They were faster, cleaner, more evolved. But they weren't ready for Ayla's brutality, for the raw, messy chaos of a human brawler who'd survived genocide. She gutted one with a plasma spike, shot another mid-dash, and then shoved a detonator into a third's mouth before kicking him back down a corridor. "You freaks talk about order," she growled, "but Earth taught me how to break gods." Meanwhile, in orbit, the Guardian tore through cruisers in a Titan-class void suit enhanced with wormhole jump capability. He blinked between ships, appearing inside command decks and ripping through bridge crews. His armor glowed red-hot from constant battle, but he pressed forward, unstoppable. Inside the council chamber, the Grand Tribunal gathered in panic. 11 robed figures, some over 600 years old, their veins pulsing with gene augments and self-righteousness. "This cannot be," one hissed. "They were supposed to be extinct." A heavy thud shattered the chamber doors. The Guardian stepped inside, his armor smoking, blade dragging across the floor. "We were asleep," he said. "Not gone." One of the tribunal members raised a hand to summon guards, but a rail shot punched through his skull before he could speak. Isla entered behind the Guardian, bloodied and grinning. "Your empire ends today," she said. The tribunal tried to flee. They screamed commands, summoned drones, activated security systems. It didn't matter. The humans didn't come for negotiation. They came to erase the past. The Guardian walked to the central dais, where the Council's emblem glowed. With a single strike, he shattered it. Warden activated the final protocol. Deep within the station's core, explosive charges detonated. The Revenant, in orbit, opened a wormhole back to Earth. Ayla and the Guardian ran. As they leapt into the final evac craft, the Council's throne erupted in light, a supernova of metal and fire swallowing the greatest symbol of alien power. The Council died not with a scream, but with a silence Earth had been denied for centuries. Later, back on Earth, the skies were clear. Humanity had won, not by negotiation, not by mercy, but by becoming what the galaxy feared, survivors with teeth. Ayla stood on the ruined steps of an old city, now being rebuilt. Children ran past her. Life had returned. The Guardian stood beside her, silent as always. "You ever think we went too far?" she asked. He stared at the stars. "Number." "They started the fire," he said. "We just finished it." And far above, the stars shimmered like they finally understood what it meant to challenge Earth. The Galactic Council was the oldest and most powerful governing body in the known universe. It was composed of species whose civilizations had lasted for tens of thousands, even millions of years. Their technological prowess was unmatched, their wisdom infinite, at least that's what they believed. Then humanity arrived. When the first human representatives stepped onto the Council's grand hall, they were met with laughter. Not whispers, not polite chuckles, full, unrestrained laughter. The representatives of the more ancient races barely contained their amusement. Humans were a joke. Their civilization was a mere 3,000 years old at best. They had only been in space for a few centuries. They still had internal conflicts, they still struggled with disease, and they still had to use primitive cybernetics instead of organic evolution to enhance themselves. Compared to the empires that had ruled the stars for millennia, they were nothing more than children, barbarians playing at being a spacefaring race. The Darathi delegate, a tall, serpentine being with bioluminescent veins, slithered forward with a mocking smile. And what does your fledgling species wish to contribute to the Council? Farming techniques? Perhaps some primitive metallurgy? The chamber filled with more laughter. The human ambassador, Michael Carter, simply smiled. He had known this was coming. Humanity had read the reports, seen the arrogance of the Council races. They had been prepared for ridicule. What the Council wasn't prepared for was the truth. Michael took a step forward, his voice calm but steady. You mock us because of our age, because we are young. He let the words hang in the air, waiting for the laughter to die down. And yet, despite our age, we are here, standing among you. Have you ever wondered why? The laughter faded slightly. A few of the council members exchanged glances. You believe time grants wisdom, that the longer a civilization exists, the stronger it becomes? Michael's eyes scanned the crowd. But tell me, how many of your ancient empires have fallen? How many species do you now call extinct because they grew complacent? How many civilizations stagnated and faded into irrelevance? Silence. We are young, yes, but in that youth, we have something none of you have anymore. Drive. When we reached our moon, we went further. When we mastered spaceflight, we pushed beyond our own system. We have barely been here for a cosmic blink, and yet we have already reached the stars. Michael leaned forward, his voice darkening. And if we have done all this in just a few thousand years, imagine what we will become in 10,000. A murmur spread through the chamber. The amusement was gone. In its place, an uncomfortable realization. The council had laughed at them. But perhaps, just perhaps, they should have been afraid. The silence that followed Michael Carter's words was thick with tension. The Galactic Council, once filled with laughter and mockery, now shifted uncomfortably. The reality was beginning to set in. Humanity wasn't just another fledgling species. They were something else entirely. The Darathi delegate, who had led the initial mockery, narrowed his glowing yellow eyes. He leaned forward, his voice laced with condescension. Impressive rhetoric, human, but words alone do not make a species powerful. Your people have no great fleets, no planet-cracking weapons, no ancient archives of wisdom. Michael smirked. Oh? Is that what you think? He tapped on his wrist communicator. In an instant, a holographic display filled the council chamber. It was a star map, one that showed an alarming detail, hundreds of human colonies. The council gasped. They had expected a dozen, maybe 20 at most. But hundreds? That was impossible. The growth was too fast. Even for an expansionist race, the resources required to establish so many settlements in such a short time should have been beyond their reach. The Ralzek ambassador, a towering insectoid with razor-sharp mandibles, clicked his jaws in agitation. This cannot be correct. Your species was barely crawling out of your own system a few centuries ago. Michael nodded. Yes, and now we are here. The hologram changed again, this time displaying the battle records of humanity, not against alien foes, but against themselves. Wars that had shaped their resilience, conflicts that had pushed them to adapt, to innovate, to survive. The Great Wars, the nuclear age, the rise of artificial intelligence, the era of global conflicts and space militarization. Each one had been brutal, but each one had made humanity stronger. Your civilizations reached an age of peace so long ago that you forgot what struggle means, Michael said, his tone sharp. But we have never known peace for long. Every generation has fought for something, and that fight has forged us into something you can't comprehend. The Zalari delegate, a creature of pure energy encased in a floating crystalline shell, hummed in thought. You claim strength through suffering, but suffering often leads to destruction. How do we know your species will not burn out like so many before it? Michael's smile didn't waver. Instead, he pulled up one final piece of evidence. A simple image. It was Earth, but not just any Earth. It was Earth after the cataclysms, after nuclear disasters, asteroid impacts, climate crises, and countless self-inflicted wounds. And yet, it was still there, thriving, alive. Because no matter how much we suffer, we endure. Silence fell once again. But this time, it was different. This time, it wasn't because they were dismissing humanity. It was because, for the first time, they were beginning to understand. And they were afraid. The weight of realization settled over the chamber like a suffocating fog. The ancient races of the Galactic Council, beings who had ruled for millennia, who had seen countless civilizations rise and fall, now found themselves staring at something they had never encountered before. A species that should have been fragile. A civilization that should have been insignificant. Yet here they stood, unbroken. The Dirathi delegate's tail flicked in agitation. His confidence was shaken, but his pride would not allow him to admit it. Endurance alone does not make one superior human, he sneered. You speak of survival as if it is a virtue. But tell me, what have you contributed to the universe? What wonders have you created that compare to the knowledge of the Zilari, the genetic mastery of the Yilath, the interdimensional technologies of the Vaeltari? Michael Carter didn't flinch. He had expected this. He had prepared for it. He pulled up another projection. This time it wasn't war records. It wasn't maps of human colonies. It was human invention. You claim we have contributed nothing. But in our short existence, we have done what your ancient empires have long abandoned. The holograms flickered, shifting from one breakthrough to the next. Nanotechnology capable of repairing a dying sun, cybernetic enhancements that allowed the paralyzed to walk again. Artificial intelligence that rivaled the computational power of entire planetary networks. Medical advancements that had eradicated diseases that once plagued the stars. You stopped pushing the boundaries of possibility because you had time to wait. We never had that luxury. We had to fight for every inch of progress. And because of that, we do what you deem impossible. The chamber murmured in uneasy whispers. The weight of their own stagnation was now undeniable. The Zilari ambassador's crystalline form pulsed erratically, as if disturbed. You evolved too fast, it admitted. That is unnatural. Dangerous. You are an anomaly. Michael chuckled, stepping forward. His next words sent a shiver through the council. We are not an anomaly. We are inevitable. The council had seen countless species before, but none like humanity. None that learned so quickly, none that adapted so fiercely, none that refused to die. And now, as they sat in stunned silence, they realized the truth. Humanity had arrived. And they were never leaving. The murmurs in the chamber grew louder, shifting from disbelief to something else. Concern. Fear. Even the most arrogant among the council members couldn't ignore the truth any longer. Humanity's rise wasn't a fluke. It wasn't luck. It was a force of nature. The Dirathi delegate coiled his long, sinewy body, his tail thumping against the marble floor in irritation. He still wasn't ready to accept this. You expect us to believe that your kind will continue this reckless growth? That your fire will never burn out? That you will not, like so many before you, reach a peak and then crumble into dust? Michael Carter held his gaze steady. There was no anger in his expression, no arrogance, just cold certainty. That's the difference between us and those who came before, he said. They built civilizations to last forever. They thought time was on their side. They grew complacent. But we? His smile was almost predatory. We don't expect eternity. We expect struggle, and we embrace it. The chamber fell silent once more. For the first time, These ancient races were forced to see themselves through different eyes. They had ruled the stars for so long, had watched species rise and fall so many times, that they had never imagined encountering something like this, something that didn't fear time, that thrived on adversity. The Zalari ambassador's crystalline form pulsed with a deep, resonant hum. "And what is it you seek, human? If not dominion, then what?" Michael's smile faded, replaced with something far more dangerous: determination. "We seek what we have always sought, to go further, to be better, to survive." He let the words settle before adding, "We didn't come here for permission. We came here to warn you." The chamber held its breath. "Because if we've come this far in just a few thousand years, you should be asking yourselves one thing." Michael leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper that carried through the vast chamber. "What happens when we're no longer the young ones?" The council members had no answer. For the first time in countless millennia, the ancient races of the galaxy had encountered a species that wasn't bound by the same rules, a species that didn't fear time, that didn't submit to stagnation, a species that would never stop. And for the first time, they realized humanity was not a joke, humanity was a warning. The chamber remained silent, the weight of Michael Carter's words settling over the gathered representatives like a suffocating shroud. These were beings who had lived through the rise and fall of empires, who had shaped the stars themselves. And yet, for the first time in countless millennia, they felt something unfamiliar: dread. The Darathoi delegate, always the first to sneer, now looked more cautious than arrogant. He flicked his forked tongue, his bioluminescent scales dimming slightly. "And if we decide," he said slowly, measuring his words carefully, "that your species is a threat to the balance of the galaxy?" Michael didn't blink. "Then I would remind you that countless others have thought the same about us." He took a step forward, locking eyes with the reptilian diplomat. "They're not here anymore." The unspoken meaning sent a ripple of unease through the chamber. Humanity had not been the dominant species on Earth when they first emerged. They had not been the strongest nor the fastest, but they had become the apex predators of their world, not through brute strength, but through sheer adaptability and persistence. Now they stood before the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy, and they were delivering a message. "We are not here to conquer," Michael continued, his voice steady. "We are not here to submit. We are here to evolve. If you stand beside us, we will share the stars. If you stand in our way—" He didn't need to finish the sentence. The Ralzek ambassador, the towering insectoid with his gleaming carapace, clacked his mandibles. "You threaten war?" Michael shook his head. "Number war is for those who seek destruction. We do not seek destruction." The holographic display behind him shifted again. This time it showed something far more terrifying than humanity's past wars. It showed projections, models of human progress, their exponential growth in technology, population, and influence. It showed a future where humanity wasn't competing with the elder species. It showed a future where humanity had surpassed them. The implications were clear. The Council could resist them. They could try to suppress them. But it wouldn't change the outcome. It would only delay the inevitable. The Zalari ambassador's crystalline form pulsed erratically, its energy fluctuating with uncertainty. "You are dangerous," it murmured, almost to itself. "Not because of violence, but because you cannot be stopped." Michael simply nodded. "You finally understand." The chamber fell into an uneasy silence once more. For thousands of years, the Galactic Council had been the ultimate authority in the known universe. They had seen civilizations come and go, had dictated the fate of entire species, And now they were being forced to recognize a new reality. Humanity wasn't here to ask for acceptance. They weren't seeking approval. They were here to claim their place, and no one, not the Darathi, not the Zeleri, not any of the ancient empires, could do a damn thing to stop them. The chamber remained heavy with tension, the realization dawning upon the gathered council like the slow death of a star. For the first time in millennia, they were no longer the undisputed masters of the cosmos. The Darathi delegate, who moments ago had mocked humanity, now looked uncertain. His glowing eyes darted across the room, searching for support from the other ambassadors. But none spoke. None dared. The silence was worse than any outburst. Michael Carter stood firm, his expression unwavering. He had said what needed to be said. Now it was time to see how these so-called wise and ancient beings would react. It was the Zalari ambassador who finally broke the silence. "You are unlike any species we have encountered before," it admitted, its crystalline shell vibrating with unreadable energy. "Your kind should not have reached this point so soon. You should not be standing here." Michael smiled, but there was no warmth in it. And yet, here we are. The insectoid Ralzek ambassador shifted uncomfortably, his mandibles clicking in agitation. "What do you want from us, human? You say you do not seek war. You claim you do not seek conquest. Then why have you come?" Michael took a deep breath. "To tell you that the galaxy is changing," he said simply. "You've lived in comfort for too long. You thought time was on your side. You thought no new power could rise and challenge you. That era is over." He let his words settle before continuing. "We will not ask for permission to exist. We will not bow to decrees made by civilizations that have long since lost the fire to evolve. We do not seek to rule you, but we will not be ruled." The Darathi's scales flared in irritation. "So you seek independence?" Michael shook his head. "We seek progress. Whether you stand with us or against us is irrelevant. We are moving forward, regardless." The council chambers had witnessed countless negotiations, treaties, and diplomatic talks over the centuries. But never had they witnessed this. A species standing before them, declaring itself not as a subject, not as a threat, but as the next chapter of history itself. And the worst part? They knew it was true. The Darathi delegate coiled his long body, his glowing eyes narrowing. "Then I suppose we have no choice but to adapt as well." Michael nodded. "That would be wise." The meeting adjourned soon after, but the echoes of it would ripple across the galaxy for generations to come. For the first time in untold millennia, the great and ancient races of the cosmos had been forced to look at themselves and acknowledge the bitter truth. They were no longer the future. Humanity was, and nothing would ever be the same again. The aftermath of the meeting reverberated across the galaxy, with a force none of the ancient races could ignore. The Galactic Council, once the ultimate authority in the universe, was now left to grapple with the weight of what had just transpired. The human delegation returned to their vessel, the Sovereign, leaving the council chambers in the midst of a storm of whispered conversations, debates, and desperate reassessments of the future. The council had not yet made its official decision, but the quiet was deafening. The representatives of the oldest and most powerful species in the galaxy couldn't escape the reality that humanity had, in the span of mere decades, become a force to be reckoned with. Inside the Sovereign's command deck, Michael Carter stood by a large viewing window, staring out into the vast expanse of stars. His mind was calm, but his thoughts were anything but. The momentary silence of the meeting was deceptive. He knew the Council would not simply accept humanity's rise with open arms. They would resist. They had to. It was the only way they knew how to deal with threats. But that resistance would come at a cost. and Michael was prepared for it. The ship's communications officer, Lieutenant Isla Reynolds, approached with a fresh report. "Sir, we've just received a message from the Veltari Senate. They want a private meeting." Michael's eyes narrowed. The Veltari were known for their interdimensional knowledge, their mastery of space-time manipulation. They were not a species easily swayed by emotion or rhetoric, and their reputation for diplomacy was almost as legendary as their technology. "Set up the meeting, but remember, this is not a negotiation. We're not asking for permission," he replied, his voice steady but resolute. Isla gave a nod, but her expression was wary. "Understood, sir, but we may be walking into a hornet's nest." "I wouldn't expect anything less," Michael muttered. As the meeting time approached, the human delegation prepared for another round of diplomatic chess, aware that this would be the real test. The Veltari had always maintained a neutral stance, but their influence was vast, and their power could tip the scales of any conflict. As the shuttle carrying the human delegates neared the Veltari capital ship, Michael stood once again at the front, gazing at the massive ship floating like a phantom in the darkness of space. Its sleek, almost ethereal design looked like it was made of pure energy, its surface shifting and undulating as if it existed outside of normal space. "This will be different," he said softly, his thoughts far ahead of the moment. "But we must be ready for it." The shuttle docked, and Michael, along with his team, stepped into the Veltari's grand hall. It was a place of quiet elegance, with walls that shimmered like liquid crystal, constantly shifting colors as if the very structure of the room was alive. At the center stood a massive table, and seated around it were the Veltari council members. The first thing Michael noticed was their eyes. They weren't like any eyes he had ever seen before. Their irises were multifaceted, shifting like prisms, reflecting and refracting the light in strange, almost hypnotic ways. The Veltari had the ability to perceive time differently from most other species, which gave them a unique perspective on the universe. The lead ambassador, a being whose body seemed to flicker in and out of phase, spoke in a voice that echoed with strange harmonics. "Humanity," it began, "you have caused a great disturbance. The balance of the galaxy has been—" "Disrupted?" Michael interjected, his voice sharp. "No, Veltari, it has been changed, and you will either adapt or you will be left behind." The words hung in the air, and for a moment, it felt like the entire universe was holding its breath. The Veltari ambassador's form shimmered, its multifaceted eyes flickering as if considering something far beyond the present moment. "You presume much for a species that has only just reached the threshold of the stars," it said slowly. "But perhaps you are right. Perhaps this galaxy, this universe, is not for the old anymore. You humans, you have something the rest of us have lost. Fire." Michael stood tall. "And that fire will burn brighter than anything you have ever known." There was no more talk of submission or conquest. This wasn't about victory or defeat. It was about evolution. "What do you want, human?" the Veltari ambassador asked, the weight of the question palpable. Michael met their gaze, steady as ever. "We want the future, and we're taking it, with or without your help." The response was silence. Then, slowly, the Veltari ambassador nodded, its form shimmering like a star fading into the dawn. "You may just have what it takes to shape it." The meeting ended soon after, but the ramifications of it would echo through the galaxy for centuries to come. The Veltari, like all the others, had seen the truth. Humanity wasn't just a new force in the galaxy. They were the force that would redefine the galaxy, and they would no longer be ignored. The moment Michael and his team stepped back onto the Sovereign, The reality of what had just transpired weighed heavily in the air. The Vaeltari, the most enigmatic and detached of the elder races, had acknowledged them. Not as a curiosity, not as an upstart species, but as an equal. That, in itself, was a victory. But it wasn't over. Not yet. As the ship's airlock sealed behind them, Isla Reynolds was already moving to her console, her face tense. "Sir, we've intercepted a transmission from the Darathi homeworld. It's encrypted, but from the message structure it looks like military orders." Michael exhaled slowly. "Let me guess. Fleet mobilization?" She nodded grimly. "Looks that way. The Darathi aren't going to sit back and watch us rise. They're preparing for something." The other officers exchanged uneasy glances. No one was surprised. If any species was going to react with hostility, it would be the Darathi. They were an empire built on dominance, on subjugation. They saw power as something to be enforced, not earned, and humanity had just shattered their illusion of superiority in front of the entire Galactic Council. "Pull up the details," Michael ordered, stepping toward the main holotable. Within seconds, a galactic map flickered into view, and bright red markers began appearing near Darathi-controlled systems. The numbers were concerning: fleet formations, troop deployments, supply lines shifting. The Darathi weren't just posturing, they were planning something real. "They're moving faster than expected," Isla muttered. "They don't want to give us time to prepare." Michael's jaw tightened. "Then we take that time ourselves?" He turned to Admiral Kovacs, the Sovereign's commanding officer. The man was a veteran of Earth's last interstellar conflicts, a seasoned strategist who had fought and won against overwhelming odds before. "Admiral, we need to send word to all human colonies. Lock down supply routes, reinforce defensive positions, and initiate silent fleet movements. We don't make the first move, but we sure as hell don't let them catch us off guard." Kovacs nodded, already sending out commands to the fleet. "And what about the Council?" Isla asked. "Some of them might intervene. The Vaeltari seemed open to us, but the Ralzek and Zalari might be pressured into siding with the Darathi." Michael clenched his fists. "Then we show them exactly what happens when you push humanity into a corner." The room fell silent. Every officer present knew what that meant. Humanity had never been the first to strike, but they had never lost a war when forced to fight. And if the Darathi wanted to see what a young, hungry civilization could do when threatened, then so be it. Michael took one last look at the galactic map, at the shifting red markers that signaled the coming storm. Then he turned to his people, his voice steady. "This is what we were built for. This is why we survive. They laughed at us once. They won't be laughing for long." And as the Sovereign powered up its engines, preparing to take its place at the front lines of history, one thing became clear. The galaxy had just made its biggest mistake. It had underestimated humanity. The war began in whispers. The Darathi never made an official declaration. They didn't need to. Their fleets simply moved, first toward border colonies, then into the neutral zones, and finally toward human-occupied systems. Their military doctrine was simple: crush the enemy before they can fight back. It had worked for them for thousands of years, but they had never fought humanity. Michael Carter stood in the command center of the Sovereign, his eyes locked on the tactical display. Red markers, Darathi warships, pushed deeper into human space. But the blue markers, human fleets, weren't retreating. They were waiting. Admiral Kovacs leaned over the table, his face grim but focused. "They think we'll react like every other species they've conquered, that we'll fall back, negotiate, beg." Michael smirked. "Then let's teach them how wrong they are." The first engagement happened near Proxima Outpost, a small but strategically vital station guarding the inner colonies. The Darathi sent 3 battle cruisers, expecting an easy victory. They found nothing but empty space. Confused, they pushed forward, only for the human fleet to ambush them from the asteroid belt, a maneuver the Council races would have considered reckless. To humanity, it was standard tactics. The Darathi lost all 3 cruisers in under 15 minutes. It was only the beginning. The War of Misdirection. Humanity didn't fight like the ancient empires. They didn't line up in neat formations. They didn't rely on slow-moving dreadnoughts, and they sure as hell didn't throw wave after wave of troops at the enemy. They fought like they had always fought, with deception, adaptability, and overwhelming force at the right moment. Darathi convoys started vanishing in deep space. Their supply lines were disrupted by human stealth ships. Every time they thought they had cornered a human fleet, they were the ones walking into a trap. The Galactic Council watched in stunned silence as humanity, the young and inexperienced species, systematically dismantled one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy. And then, something happened that changed everything. The turning point, the Battle of Orion Gate. The Darathi, desperate to regain control, launched a full-scale assault on Orion Gate, a massive relay station that linked human space to the wider galaxy. They sent an entire armada, 300 ships, enough to wipe out entire fleets. Michael Carter and Admiral Kovacs had 37. The Council watched the battle unfold in real time, convinced this would be humanity's breaking point. But they didn't understand how humans fought. They didn't understand that war, to humans, was an art. Instead of facing the Darathi head-on, the human fleet shut down all communications and powered down their ships. The Darathi approached, assuming the station had already been abandoned. That was their mistake. As soon as the Darathi armada moved into range, hidden orbital mines, planted weeks in advance, detonated across their fleet. Dozens of ships were instantly destroyed, while others were thrown into chaos. Then, humanity struck. From the dark void of space, the Sovereign and its fleet powered up in unison, launching an onslaught of coordinated missile strikes, electronic warfare, and precision assaults. The Darathi never recovered. By the time the battle was over, 250 Darathi ships were destroyed. The remaining survivors surrendered, something their species had never done before. The Council received a simple message from Michael Carter after the battle. "You called us young. You called us reckless. You laughed at us. You shouldn't have." The war was no longer just a conflict. It was a reckoning. The beginning of the end. Across the galaxy, the news spread. Humanity had not only survived the Darathi onslaught, they had turned the tide. And the other ancient races? They were terrified. Because now they had to ask themselves a single, horrifying question. If humanity could do this in their infancy, what would they become in their prime? In the aftermath of Orion Gate, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session. The balance of power in the universe had shifted, and for the first time, humanity was at the center of it. The Darathi, humiliated and desperate, demanded immediate retaliation. Their ambassador's voice trembled with rage. "We must act now. If humanity is left unchecked, they will consume this galaxy. They do not know their place." But the Vaeltari, ever the observers, responded with something that sent a cold chill through the chamber. "Perhaps it is we who do not know theirs," their ambassador said, their voice echoing through the halls. The council erupted in argument. Some wanted war, some wanted to surrender. But one truth was now undeniable. Humanity wasn't just another species. They were something else, something new. Back in human space, Michael Carter knew the war wasn't over. The Darathi would never accept peace, and the rest of the council was still deciding what to do. He wouldn't give them the chance. "We end this now," he told Admiral Kovacs. "No more waiting for them to make the next move. We take the fight to them." And so, humanity did what no other species had dared to do before. They invaded an ancient empire. The Durathi homeworld, once thought untouchable, saw human warships descend from the void like predators closing in for the kill. They bypassed the Durathi's planetary defenses, not with brute force, but with ingenuity. Cyber warfare shut down their systems. Infiltration teams sabotaged their command centers. By the time the Durathi realized what was happening, it was already over. Their emperor was forced to kneel before a human delegation and sign an unconditional surrender. Humanity had done the impossible. They had defeated an elder race. When word of the Durathi's fall reached the council, the reaction was immediate. The Zalari, the Ralzek, even the once neutral Valtari, they all understood. The galaxy would never be the same. Some races chose to ally with humanity, recognizing that resistance was futile. Others withdrew, hoping to avoid conflict altogether. And some, the foolish ones, began plotting in secret, hoping to one day reclaim what they had lost. But one thing was clear: humanity had arrived, and no one was laughing anymore. Years later, long after the war had ended, a new species petitioned to join the Galactic Council. They were young, much like humanity had once been. They were greeted with skepticism, with laughter, with arrogance. But then, an old recording was played before the council, Michael Carter's final words from the Orion Gate battle. "You called us young, you called us reckless, you laughed at us, you shouldn't have." Silence followed. Because now the ancient races understood. They had once mocked humanity, and they had paid the price. The cycle would not repeat. Not again. Because the galaxy had learned its lesson. Never underestimate the humans. Never again.